On a bitter winter evening, a lone man noticed two wolves silently pacing at the edge of his property. But instead of growling or baring their teeth, these majestic yet fearsome creatures seemed desperate. They pawed gently at his front door, almost as if they were pleading for refuge. When he finally opened that door, he had no idea the moment would change his life forever. What were these frozen wolves seeking? And why would they abandon the wild they called home to approach a human for warmth? Warren Pierce was no stranger to brutal winters. A lifelong resident of the remote Alaskan countryside, he had weathered countless seasons of sub-zero temperatures and howling winds. His log cabin, rugged and time-worn, stood as a symbol of resilience in one of the harshest environments on Earth. Yet despite all his experience, nothing had prepared him for what he would encounter that snowy evening. It had started out as a typical day, at least, as typical as winter could be in this isolated wilderness. Warren had chopped enough firewood to last the night and checked on his small greenhouse, which clung to life thanks to a lone electric heater. As dusk settled, he retreated indoors, ready to spend the long night beside the fire with a mug of hot tea in hand. Then, a strange scratching noise interrupted the stillness, followed by soft whines that pierced the silence. At first, Warren thought it might be a stray dog, perhaps one of the few feral ones that roamed nearby. But when he looked through the frosted window, his heart skipped a beat. Two wolves stood on his porch, thin, ragged, and dusted with snow. Their breaths curled in the icy air, and their once proud coats hung in tangled disarray. Instead of snarling or showing aggression, they trembled with cold and fatigue. One let out a faint, mournful howl, as if calling for help. Warren's instincts wrestled with caution. These were, after all, wild predators. But their eyes, glowing faintly in the low light, held no hostility, only a quiet, pleading desperation. Against every rule of logic, Warren grabbed a flashlight and cautiously cracked the door open. The closer wolf stepped forward unsteadily, eyes locked onto Warren's with a strange intensity. It didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a cry for mercy. In that moment, fear gave way to compassion. What had driven these creatures to his doorstep? And if he let them in, would his act of kindness be a fatal mistake? Thus began a remarkable encounter, one that would challenge Warren's understanding of the natural world and lead him down a path no one could have foreseen. He stood in the doorway, heart pounding, snow swirling around the wolves as they waited. The temperature had dropped well below zero, and he could see them shivering. Their eyes didn't waver, they begged for warmth, for safety. Still clutching the doorknob, Warren hesitated. Common sense told him this was madness. But the longer he looked at them, the more he believed they meant no harm. Desperation had driven them here, not aggression. He took a deep breath and opened the door wider. The wolves exchanged a glance, if such a thing could be called that, then slowly stepped forward, their paws crunching lightly in the snow. As they entered, their bodies seemed to release the tension they'd carried for miles. Warren shut the door behind them, sealing out the wind, and offered a silent prayer that he was doing the right thing. For a moment, the wolves stood still, breathing heavily in the warmth of the cabin. Then they began to explore, cautiously sniffing furniture and firewood. One wolf, slightly smaller, had a noticeable limp and a gray patch across its back. The other, larger and more alert, had a scar running along its muzzle. Despite their weakened state, there was a quiet grace in their movements. Warren approached the fireplace and tossed in another log, filling the room with a golden glow. The wolves drew closer to the heat, one of them whining softly as if in disbelief at the warmth. He realized they needed food. From his modest pantry, he pulled out meat he had planned to cook for himself. It felt risky to feed raw cuts to wild animals, but their condition left him little choice. He set the meat on a plate on the floor and stepped back. The smaller wolf approached first, sniffed, and took a tentative bite. The larger one joined soon after, and together they devoured the food within seconds. Their eyes met Warren's briefly, grateful, relieved. Once fed, they settled near the fire. Warren, still cautious, kept his distance but couldn't help but admire their beauty. They were no longer predators in his eyes, they were survivors. Hours passed in a surreal kind of peace. Warren read by the fire while the wolves dozed, occasionally stirring at sounds from outside. At one point, the larger wolf whimpered in its sleep, its paws twitching in a dream. Warren had the impulse to comfort it but held back. Later, he made a bedding area for them near the fire. They accepted it, curling up with noses tucked under tails. Watching them, Warren felt a heavy fatigue descend. Before heading to bed, he checked all the locks, a habit in bear country, but now more important than ever. He prayed the night would remain calm. It could have been a moose or a bear, but then a human silhouette emerged from behind a thick pine. Adrenaline surged through Warren. He rarely had visitors, especially not in the harshest part of winter. Grabbing his coat and flashlight, he pressed an ear to the door, listening. The larger wolf continued to growl, reinforcing that someone was indeed out there. The smaller wolf stirred, trying to rise with a soft whimper. "It's all right," Warren whispered, hoping to calm them both, and himself. He opened the door just a crack. A blast of cold air rushed in. Outside, the figure had vanished, but footprints in the snow curved around the side of the cabin. Warren stepped out, nerves taut. The wind nipped at his face, and he tucked his gloved hands under his arms as he scanned the tree line. There, a flicker of motion near the woodpile. Curiosity warred with caution. Whoever was skulking around might be in trouble, or they might be dangerous. "Hello," Warren called. "If you need help, say something." The only response was the howling wind. He followed the trail, each step crunching over snow, overlapping the stranger's tracks. His heart pounded. Had word spread about the wolves? Was someone searching for them, or intending them harm? No answer came. He circled the cabin, checking for signs of forced entry. Near the woodpile, he paused. Fresh gouges marked the bark of a nearby tree. As he leaned in to examine them, a voice behind him made him whirl around. "Are they inside?" the woman demanded. Her voice was low and urgent. She was bundled in a heavy parka, her face mostly hidden beneath a hood and scarf. Only her eyes were visible, intense, worried eyes, flicking toward the cabin door. Warren raised his hands in a peaceful gesture. "Who are you?" he asked, trying to sound calm despite the jolt of surprise. "I'm tracking those wolves," she said, as if it were obvious. "They're part of a nearby pack. They went missing days ago. I've been following their trail." Warren's pulse quickened. "Hunting them?" he echoed, fear tightening in his chest. She must have seen his alarm. "Not like that," she said quickly. "I'm trying to help. I'm with a wildlife rehabilitation group. We've been monitoring this pack for a while, especially those two." Her voice softened. "The smaller one's injured and separated. She won't survive out here alone." Relief swept through Warren, though a trace of suspicion remained. "Then why not come to my door instead of sneaking around?" She glanced away, a hint of embarrassment in her eyes. "I wasn't sure what I'd find. People can be unpredictable when it comes to wolves." Warren couldn't argue with that. "Come inside," he said, motioning toward the cabin. "But move slowly. They're skittish." Inside, the larger wolf barked a warning, stepping between the woman and the injured pup. She gently removed her scarf and hood, revealing tired but determined features. Then, crouching, she held out her hands, palms up, in a gesture of peace. "Hey there, big guy," she murmured. "It's okay. I'm a friend." Her tone was calm, practiced, like a vet or seasoned handler. She inched closer. After a tense moment, the wolf let her approach. "My name's Cara," she said over her shoulder. "I'm a field researcher with the North Ridge Wildlife Center." Her presence seemed to settle the wolves. She examined the bandaged leg and nodded, visibly impressed. "You did a good job cleaning this up," she said. "Might have saved her life." "I was just trying to help," Warren said quietly. Cara explained the pack had been under observation due to declining numbers in the region. The smaller wolf, a young female, had likely been hurt in a trap or territorial fight. The larger wolf was her sibling and only remaining family. The pair had vanished during a blizzard, and the research team had feared the worst until Cara picked up their trail. As she spoke, the wolves relaxed further, postures easing, as if they remembered her scent, or trusted her voice. Warren felt both relieved and heartbroken. Their time with him might be ending. "You're going to take them back to your center?" he asked. Cara nodded. "We have a secure enclosure where we can treat her leg. Once she's healed, we'll return them to their territory." She hesitated, then added, "Of course, only if you're okay with that. They're on your land." Warren looked at the wolves, his chest tight. He had grown attached to them, but he knew what was right. "It's what's best for them, isn't it?" "It is," Cara confirmed gently. "They're wild creatures. They'll thrive once they're healthy and reunited with their pack." Warren nodded. Compassion and responsibility tugged at him in equal measure. He stood. "Then do what you need to do," he said. "I'll help any way I can." A calming hand settled on Warren's shoulder. "Just a little further," Cara encouraged. "We'll find that marker." They pushed on until they reached the creek's far side, where the tree-line resumed, looming like silent sentinels. Snow whipped into their faces, the wind stealing their breath and clouding their vision. Warren squinted, scanning the trunks for any flash of red. Then, through the swirling white, a faint splash of color on a tall pine. Relief surged through him as he guided the snowmobile toward it. Beneath the pine stood a half-erected shelter. Two figures in heavy winter gear struggled to secure tarps against the relentless wind. A small fire crackled nearby, a fragile beacon of warmth. Cara waved frantically. The figures turned and raised their arms in greeting. As the snowmobile drew close, Warren cut the engine. Cara leapt off, shouting over the wind. "We found them," she said, jerking her thumb toward the sled. "They're weak but stable. The smaller ones got a leg injury." Dan, tall, broad-shouldered, with a salt-and-pepper beard, nodded grimly. "Leighton, get them under shelter." His companion, a compact woman named Nina, hurried to lay out thick blankets inside the tented space. "That storm's about to hammer us," she warned, voice tight with urgency. Together, they coaxed the wolves from the sled. The larger one growled low when Dan approached, but Cara's calming presence kept it in check. The smaller wolf, trembling with cold and pain, allowed Nina to guide it onto the blankets. Warren hovered nearby, ready to intervene. Once the wolves were settled near the fire, the team moved quickly. Dan staked down extra lines while Nina set out medical supplies, sterile bandages, sedatives, a proper first aid kit. Warren stood back, watching. Relief mingled with something more complicated, an unexpected pang of loss. 4 days, the wolves had been his sole responsibility. He'd forged a quiet bond with them in the isolation of the wilderness. Now, handing them over felt like letting go. Cara caught his expression. She looked up from rechecking the smaller wolf's leg. "We'll make sure they get the best care," she said gently. "And when they're ready, we'll talk about release. Maybe you could even be there." Warren managed a small smile. "I'd like that." The wind rattled the tarps, but inside the shelter, there was warmth, not just from the fire, but from compassion, teamwork, and a shared respect for the wild creatures they were trying to save. As the sky darkened and the storm intensified, the group worked tirelessly. Dan and Nina reinforced the windward side with ropes and stakes. Cara kept a close eye on the wolves. Warren helped stack snow around the shelter as a makeshift windbreak. Charlie, the snowmobile, sat nearby, already half buried. Warren glanced at it, uneasy. If the weather worsened, they'd be trapped. The storm howled on, forcing them to huddle around a shallow fire pit. The flames offered scant warmth, but enough to stave off numbness. The wolves dozed, lulled by the crackle of fire and the murmur of human voices. The injured one breathed steadily under sedation. The larger kept a wary eye on the group, but lay protectively close. "She's stable," Cara said after a while, relief in her voice. "We'll need to watch for infection, but she's strong." Warren stroked the larger wolf's flank in a gesture of reassurance. To his surprise, it didn't flinch. It even leaned slightly into his touch. "You're one brave soul," he murmured. "Both of you are." Night fell hard. Wind screamed through the trees. Sleep was impossible. Someone was always tending the fire, checking tarps, watching for signs of collapse. During one of his shifts, Warren noticed the larger wolf pacing restlessly, circling its sibling. It nudged the sleeping wolf with its nose, whining low as if to say, "I'm here." Warren's throat tightened. In that small act of devotion, he saw the truth of what Cara had been saying all along. These weren't just predators, they were family, capable of loyalty, of love. Sometime past midnight, the storm reached its peak. Snow fell in thick, blinding sheets. The shelter quivered with each blast. Cara and Nina scrambled to secure the tarp while Dan barked orders. Warren helped, though his fingers were stiff with cold. The wolves grew agitated. The larger one bared its teeth whenever the tarp snapped too close. Cara calmed it with gentle words, extending her hand in trust. "Easy," she whispered. "We're just keeping you safe." Eventually, the wind eased to a steady roar. Dan peered out from the shelter's entrance, scanning with a flashlight. "It's letting up," he called. "If it holds, we might move by morning." They took brief turns resting. Warren sat beside the wolves, back against a wooden brace. The larger wolf finally lay near him, head resting on its paws. He allowed himself a small smile at the trust that had formed. He looked to the sleeping smaller wolf, injured, sedated, vulnerable, and whispered a promise. "You'll be okay. We'll make sure of it." By dawn, silence had returned. The air was still, the world blanketed in deep snow. Cara stirred to check the radio. Nina stoked the fire. Warren stretched aching limbs. The wolves blinked awake. The storm had passed, but their journey wasn't over. Shelter. The newly fallen snow blanketed the landscape like a silencer, muffling even the faintest sounds. Inside the makeshift shelter, Warren and Cara took turns tending to the wolves and stoking the fire, while Dan and Nina struggled to clear a path toward the main road. Each radio update brought only partial success. Fallen branches and drifting snow continued to block their route. Yet Warren's thoughts kept drifting back to the third wolf, the gaunt figure he'd seen in the woods, eyes filled with fear. Something about that encounter lingered in his mind. Could it be related to the pair they'd already rescued? Another separated member of their fractured pack? Meanwhile, the two wolves under the shelter were showing signs of improvement. The smaller one, though still clearly in pain, could now shift positions without whimpering. Its sibling remained close, vigilant, gently licking the bandaged leg in a display of quiet devotion. Cara administered careful doses of painkillers. "These help, but they make her groggy and off balance," she explained, frowning at the storm-tossed landscape. "I just wish we could get them to the center. They need proper care, space, nutrition, and peace." Warren nodded. "They've come a long way," he said softly. "But I can't stop thinking about that other wolf. If it's part of their pack." Cara gave him a thoughtful look. "It might be. Or it might not. We can't risk everything on a rescue we're not prepared for." He understood, but the image of the lone wolf wouldn't leave him. That afternoon, Dan's voice crackled through the radio. "We've got a partial opening. If we push hard, we might clear enough for a vehicle by tomorrow morning. Think you can hold out?" "We're good," Cara responded. "The wolves are stable. Just hurry." She turned to Warren with a reassuring nod. Relief swept through him. Just one more night, and they could move the wolves to safety. He knelt by the larger wolf, running a hand through its thick fur. "Just hold on," he whispered. "Help's coming." But that relief was short-lived. Near dusk, as the sky turned a bruised purple, the larger wolf stiffened. It rose suddenly, ears alert, eyes locked on the tree line. The smaller wolf whimpered, uneasy. "What is it now?" Warren asked, tensing. Cara grabbed her binoculars and scanned the edge of the forest. "There's movement. I can't tell if it's a person or an animal." A chill crept down Warren's spine. Could be that lone wolf again. The larger wolf barked sharply, then stepped off the blankets, favoring its injured leg as it approached the shelter's exit. "Easy," Warren said, moving to block it. "You can't go running off now." The wolf growled, not with aggression, but with anxious urgency. It looked between Warren and its injured sibling, as though torn between duty and caution. Cara's radio crackled again. Dan's voice was tense. Spotted another wolf near the road. It's weak. Might be heading your way. Warren's heart leapt. That has to be it. The third wolf, it's coming. Cara exchanged a glance with Nina. We can't let it get too close, not in this state. But we can't abandon the two we've already saved either. I'll go, Warren offered. You stay with them. I'll try to intercept it. You're just one person, Nina protested. What if it bolts? Or if it's too far gone? I won't be reckless, Warren insisted. But I can't let it freeze to death. Cara hesitated, then nodded. Keep your radio on. If you run into trouble, call us. Warren dressed in layers, packed a small first aid kit, and checked the fuel in his snowmobile. Enough for a short trek. I'll be back, he promised the wolves. The smaller one whimpered as if sensing his departure. As Warren mounted Charlie, his battered snowmobile, the larger wolf let out a long, mournful howl, its cry echoing against the snow. Hang tight, Warren murmured, steering into the deepening twilight. He followed faint tracks and half-remembered landmarks, aiming for the partially cleared road Dan had mentioned. Each growl of the engine felt jarring in the otherwise silent wilderness. Finally, he saw movement near a stand of spruce. He cut the engine, grabbed his flashlight, and advanced slowly. There it was. Thin. Limping. Its ribs painfully visible. The wolf growled faintly as Warren neared. I'm not here to hurt you, Warren said softly. The wolf stared at him with hollow eyes, its frame trembling. It looked even worse than the first two had. Your family's nearby, he added gently. Let me help. The wolf staggered and collapsed onto its haunches. From behind a tree, Dan emerged, rifle slung but ready. Easy, he said. Warren knelt in the snow and extended his hand, hoping the wolf would sense his intent. The wind carried his scent toward the animal, whose nostrils flared. It let out a low whine. Then it slumped, too weak to fight. Carefully, Warren laid a blanket over its body. It's all right, he murmured. We'll get you back to your family. Dan stepped forward, scanning the woods. We should move. If this is part of the pack, it could be the missing piece. Warren gently lifted the wolf's head. It was shockingly light. Let's move it carefully. I'll take the front. Together, they eased the wolf onto a sled. It whimpered but didn't resist. Dan led the way on his snowmobile, towing the sled. Warren followed close behind on Charlie. The journey back was quiet, each mile heavy with tension and hope. By the time they returned, the sky had softened into lavender and gold. Cara rushed out to meet them. You found it, she gasped. Warren nodded. Alive, but just barely. They brought the sled into the shelter. The two wolves stirred at once. The larger one barked sharply, ears erect. The smaller lifted its head, confused. Cara stood between them and the newcomer, just in case. As they unwrapped the blanket, the third wolf lifted its head and locked eyes with the larger one. A beat of silence. Then a soft, pleading whine. The larger wolf's body language shifted, ears flat, tail low. It moved forward, sniffed the new arrival, and licked its muzzle. The smaller wolf whimpered and dragged itself closer. All three were suddenly locked in a silent conversation, bodies communicating what words never could. They know each other, Cara whispered. No snarling. No tension. This is family. Warren stepped back, eyes misting. The third wolf, despite its weakness, reached out and nuzzled its sibling. The larger wolf hovered protectively nearby. Soon, all three were curled together on the blankets. A reunited pack. You did it, Cara whispered to Warren. If you hadn't gone out there. He shook his head. We all did this. I had to try. Cara's radio crackled again. Dan's voice. Roads clear. We'll be there in 20. The group sprang into action. Nina prepared mild sedatives. Warren helped load the wolves into padded crates. The newcomer resisted but eventually settled. Through the mesh walls, the wolves maintained eye contact, silent, trusting. As the vehicle roared to life, Warren stood with Cara under the glow of headlights. "You're welcome to visit them at the center," she said. "Once they're healed, we'll release them together." Warren nodded, his voice thick. "I'd like that. They'll be glad to see you again." As the truck disappeared into the snowy night, Warren felt a tear slip down his cheek. Relief, gratitude, grief, but also peace. He whispered a final goodbye to the wolves, then turned to Cara and smiled. "Thank you for everything." She squeezed his arm. "No, thank you for reminding us why we do this."